I've developed a simple procedure for filling my tub. Since the hot water tank doesn't contain quite enough hot water to fill it properly, I have to do it in 2 installments, so to speak. I don't think that camera's high enough. I'm in my fictional mode right now as Sidney Klein, the late night talk show host, on some obscure FM station, KQRD. Which I contrived, when was it? Back in 2014, 2015, sometime in there. I recorded many a session, Sidney Klein and his and the voices of his invented guests, some men, some women. And maybe it was from that emerged later on in my mind the notion for a novel titled The Impressionist, about a stand-up comedian who endeavors to hit the big time and does, although the way he did it was not to be recommended, and he certainly didn't expect it, because he was doing a performance in Spokane at the Spokane Comedy Club when one of the people in the audience turned out to be a would-be mass murderer, and he shot Jack Bayfield in the shoulder and then proceeded to shoot other members of the audience and killed 2 of them before he was overcome and disarmed by other members of the audience. Of course, later Bayfield had to testify in court about this incident, the murder trial, since he was one of the chief witnesses. And although I didn't include that trial in the book, trials are tricky. You have to be careful about procedure, for one thing, and they have the standard form of a legal trial. The prosecutor always presents his case first, then he rests his case, and then the defense attorney comes in and presents his case, and then he concludes that, and then they have their closing arguments, and where they sum up everything, and they don't have to be exactly kosher, and some of them often are not, and then the jury does their work and decides the fate of the defendant, who might either be found guilty or he or she might be acquitted. You never know. One of the most outrageous acquittals that I can remember is that of the man who was beaten half to death by police in Los Angeles, which the decision of that trial set off a huge destructive demonstration, riot, LA riots, and that had not been the first either. Black people in LA had been systematically oppressed for a long time. Systematically. It's rather disgusting and sickening how conservative-minded politicians, legislators in Congress, with their inbred notions of white supremacy, fashion these laws which systematically excluded black people from any number of jobs, professions. Just the United States was intended to advance toward the ideal claims laid out in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. How many times has that goddamn document been amended? 24 times. 24 goddamn times. And now, after 50 years on the books, from 1972 until now, Roe versus Wade's going to be overturned by a conservative court. Conservative court whose members, many members of which were raised as Catholics. And of course, they do know their Latin through and through. So, in this area of jurisprudence, the United States is going to be thrown back to the 1950s. It seems as though the Republicans in general, want the entire culture of this country thrown back to the 1950s. With all its attendant disregard for human rights, especially in the Jim Crow South. And those people don't change their views very quickly. I mean, these ideas are transmitted from one generation to the next. Most effectively. And so, these persistent prejudices remain. The fact of the matter is that parents, many of them, do not raise their children very well at all. I mean, look at the result. I read in the newspaper once, it was a report on some psychiatric convention of psychiatrists somewhere, national convention. And they reached the conclusion that 10% of the adult population was psychotic. Well, I read that news article years ago, and I'm sure the numbers increased since then. What I find particularly intriguing about what has happened in our country since I started becoming aware of what was going on in it, which was, I don't know, when I was 11 or 12 years old, maybe. Prior to that, it was just a blissful, ignorant childhood. Anyway, is the compounding of influence and intent over the years in just about anything you care to name. And compounding is an interesting word because part of this compounding you will see if you look back over the years at the progression of it, the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry has advanced with astronomical profits over time. And it's altered the way we approach our lives altogether. We're a pill-popping nation. We've been a pill-popping nation ever since what Robert Lowell called the tranquilized generation of the 1950s. The tranquilized generation. How do you like that? God. Well, there was the tranquilized generation of the 1950s, then there was the upheaval of the late 60s, the sexual and cultural revolution that we, some of us anyway, enjoyed in the United States. Cultural revolution underway roughly at the same time in China was utterly different. There Mao was getting quite ripe into his old age, and he was getting a little worried that his hand on the helm, so to speak, was weakening. They called him the Great Helmsman. And he decided that continual ongoing revolution was the only answer to everything. And so he set loose the young people, the teenagers, the Red Guard, so-called. And they went out and ransacked and pillaged. They broke antiquities, destroyed them. They humiliated college professors, marched them through the streets with dunce caps and threw rotten vegetables at them and put them on some, I don't know, set them up on some stand or chair or something and made them confess all their political sins to everyone in the crowd. And then sent them off to labor camps to be re-educated in the rural communes. Brother. And then, and this is why people in the United States, they don't know what they're missing. Most of us. We don't appreciate the country that we live in fully enough, by any means. You know, the repubs and right-wing fanatics, they gripe and complain about all their God-given fundamental rights and so on, that they'll exercise at the drop of a hat and at the edge of their grave if they must. Well, fuck that. Libertarian assholes. There are, what, about 350, 360 million people in the United States. China has 4 times as many people. 4 times as many. Their economy is just about head to head with ours right now, and it's going to supersede the economy of the United States in probably 10 years' time. And just as when Russia launched the Sputnik back in, what was it, 1958, the day the economists decide that the People's Republic of China has exceeded, at least in productivity, economic productivity, that of the United States, people are simply going to weep and throw their arms up in a passionate fit of fear. No doubt. We're already conducting economic warfare against China and Russia. Russia having brought it upon themselves with their murderous invasion of Ukraine. And the Russian people are going to suffer just as much, if not more so, than the Iranian people did when the U.S. Threw that country under pretty severe sanctions. We're trying to produce nuclear weapons grade plutonium. And they were getting closer and closer every day with their multitudinous centrifuges that refines uranium. God damn. This is a scary fucking world we live in, and that is a fact. That is a hard, brutal fucking fact.